So, welcome back. I hope you are enjoying the summit so far. My name is Surya Sinan, and I will be with you for the next three talks. Our next presentation will be given by Jakub Sobolewski. Welcome, Jakub. Jakub
Well,
is a senior R-Shiny engineer at Epsilon. His background is in physics. He studied at Warsaw University of Technology. Before joining Epsilon, he worked as an actuary analyst and model developer in insurance and banking business. Apart from his large engineering experience, he's an active contributor to the R community with useful packages and great content. I encourage you to subscribe to his blog, where he regularly writes about testing-driven development and testing in R. Jakub, thank you for being here. The job is yours.
thank you, Ariel. Automated testing is so much more than just catching bugs or making sure that there's that green status bar on CI. Doing automated testing, if done right, can give us plenty of other benefits. But on the other, if done wrong, it can cost us a lot. Since I joined Epsilon over 3 years ago, I've been learning, experimenting, and improving the ways we can test our code. I worked across many different projects, from building small, shiny app prototypes that were built in span of 2 weeks to projects that lasted many months with multiple developers and changing requirements. I've seen how testing can help us deliver better software. I've also seen how testing can be a burden when done wrong. And after all this time, I made my own contribution to the R community by creating the Cucumber package, whose goal is to help write high-level, user behavior-focused tests. And I really like testing. I love the idea of self-verifying code. But I don't test all of my code. I try to be intentional with what I test and what I don't. And when coming into testing, we should ask ourselves, should I test it? Is it worth it? And spoiler alert, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So let's see what I mean by that and how to make sure that we get the most of our investment in automated testing. Development teams can add automated tests along the way, which is more of the agile way of creating software. They can add it after writing the software, which is more of the waterfall approach. They can even not do them themselves, but outsource testing to a separate quality assurance team. And no matter what the approach is, the same rules should apply. Writing good test code is difficult, and it takes a while to learn how to make good test code. And what also applies is that maintaining bad test code is harder. So, introduction of automated testing has its costs. It takes a time to learn it. It takes time to write. It takes time to maintain tests. And we need to be aware of those costs. It might be tempting to skip on testing in early stages of the project, but it might turn to be a costly mistake. Development without testing might be faster at the beginning, but as the project goes on, there should be a point when the initial investment of writing automated tests starts to pay off. So we have built good tests when the additional cost of building and maintaining automated tests is offset by savings through reduced manual testing. It should also be offset by savings on debugging and troubleshooting, as well as the cost of remediation of defects that could have gone undetected until later stages of the project, like formal testing phase or production usage of the software. And what happens if we don't succeed in building good tests? Well, this can be discovered only on the later stages of the project, only when the test suite becomes large. And in this scenario, tests become a burden and can even halt the development process as changing the production code requires changing a ton of tests. And if tests become too difficult or time-consuming to maintain, it's easy to give up on them. We might be even tempted to remove some of the test code, as it's just not possible to move forward without doing so. So this situation is dangerous, and it slowly creeps in. It might be hard to notice it early, but we have some heuristics that can help us see and avoid it, like the testing pyramid. So building automated testing has its cost. Maintaining the test code also has its costs. But so does not having automated testing. And as with everything, there are trade-offs. So what are other benefits of automated testing that can make this decision of investment more worthwhile? What we could get from automated testing could be categorized as follows. We can get better code quality, documentation, reproducibility, scalability, and reliability. So let's look at better code quality. And there are two facets to it. One is, have we built the correct software? The other is, have we built the software correctly? And if we're practicing a development process in which we write tests before writing production code, tests can give us a way to capture what we expect from the system before we build it. Tests allow us to define the system's behavior across different scenarios in a format that can be executed. To ensure we're building the right software, it's essential that our tests accurately reflect how the system will be used in practice. Thinking through scenarios in sufficient detail to turn them into tests helps us uncover areas where the requirements might be unclear or contradictory. In this sense, tests help us reduce the risk of building the wrong thing. So let's imagine we want to allow users to get insights about the subjects in a given clinical trial. We could start with a vague idea captured as a user story. As a user, I want to see a visual representation of the subjects in a clinical trial so that I can easily understand characteristics of the population in a study. And this is very vague, and we can't possibly translate it into software. So what do? We need to break it down into more smaller, precise pieces. We might start thinking what those visuals should be, what data should be displayed, and how the user should interact with it. We might end up with a list of requirements like, I want to see a histogram of subjects by a treatment group, or maybe I want to see a distribution of subjects' age, or maybe I want to see just all the subjects for a given treatment group. And you might see that those requirements are still vague. But now we are more specific what value we want to provide to the user, and we have a clear idea of what we want them to be able to do with our software. The next step in making those specifications the most precise is to make them exactly translatable into tests. And this would be to create examples of scenarios. We could write those scenarios using a specific language called Gherkin, which is a language that can be used in behavior-driven development. It contains specific keywords like given, when, then, that helps us structure and come up with those scenarios. And when we're working with examples like this, with real values, we'll discover what exactly we need in order to implement a feature. So for example, in previous versions of requirements, we didn't realize that we need to specify the study and the population. And without it, we can't possibly display the subjects. This is an outside-in approach to testing, when we start with the user's perspective and work our way down to the implementation details. And at this level, we don't even know if this is a Markdown report or a web app, or maybe even a neural link that uploads images to the mind of the user. And that's not the point. We don't care about the implementation details. We care about the user's perspective if they can get what they need, not how they get it from our software. And those type of tests can be implemented just with test.dat or with Cucumber. So this approach to development and testing is called behavior-driven development, as it's a method to ensure that we're building the right software. It puts high emphasis on satisfying users' needs, while unit tests of individual functions ensure that we are building the software correctly. So now documentation. I bet that you've at least once in your lifetime came across a situation when you wanted to use a piece of code, looked at how it's used in one context, wanted to apply it to another, read some documentation, but it still didn't work as expected. And if that's not you, you're super lucky. Tests can help us understand how the code is supposed to work by showing us how the code works in expected and unexpected scenarios. Even better, with tests, there's an easily accessible place where the code runs. So if we're not satisfied with the examples, we can easily plug in, run the debugger, and see step by step how the code works. So how is that different from just documentation? Examples in documentation can easily get outdated and misleading. And that's why by default in our packages, examples and function documentations are run during package checks. But just running examples won't assert that they're working correctly. So tests can be the most precise documentation, because not only they check if the code runs, but if it runs correctly. Now on to reproducibility. And mistakes happen. There's no way around it. It's about what we do with this fact that matters. And when a bug is found in the software, we need to know what caused it. And if we have made our unit tests fairly small by only testing a single behavior in each, it should be trivial to find the bug based on which test is failing. And this is one of the big advantages of testing over manual tests. The manual test will tell us that some behavior expected by the user isn't working, but the unit test will tell us why. And we call it defect localization. Tests not only should tell us that something is wrong, but also tell us precisely what failed, making the fix easier as we save time on debugging and searching for the issue. But this only comes when we write good tests, and there's enough of them. So if there was a bug that wasn't caught, it's time to add an automated test for it. And all of those benefits that we get from automated testing are wonderful, but we won't get them if we don't write tests which we can trust. It's critical that tests are as simple as possible so that there are no bugs in the test code itself. Another facet of reproducibility is that tests show us what's been implemented and they are the proof that the software works. When we have a test suite that covers all the features of the software, we can be confident that the software works as expected, at least in the environment that it's been running. The same, for example, as we use for the CI. And if we are running our test suite in CI, which you always should do, we have those snapshots of exact circumstances in which the software is runnable and that it runs according to our specification defined by automated tests. So how about scalability? And this scalability is in the context of growing the code base, not growing the usability of our product. Making changes in a code base without automated tests is a very risky business. We never know if our change doesn't break something. And even if we're very careful, we might miss something. Even if we check the outputs manually and everything is fine, we might still make mistakes when checking. And even if we haven't something still might come up later, maybe a new scenario, new use case, and there will still be some error. So this risk forces us to go very slowly. And even then, we're not 100% secure. So when relying on manual testing, it's easy to get very conservative about introducing changes, even the simple ones. And when the deadlines are tight and resources for manual testing are scarce, we might decide to skip some changes or do a quick check and hope for the best. And imagine that your team implements an optimization of the app that shouldn't really change the behavior of the app and could be introduced with a new release to deliver value to its users. But since there are no automated tests, the deadline is tight, the team is afraid to merge it because they don't know what could break. So they might decide to skip the optimization and deliver the app without it. And this is a lost opportunity to improve your code. So when working with code that has a good test suite, we can work much more quickly. We can be bolder about introducing changes. We can be more experimental because we know that if we break something, we will learn it quickly. And we can be more confident that if we introduce some changes, they don't accidentally break something in a totally different place. And we can easily learn how much code we exercise during tests with packages like cover. Code coverage can give us a good idea of how much of the code is tested and how much is not. But there are some caveats to this approach. We might have 100% code coverage and still have bugs in the code. We might have 0% code coverage and have no bugs in the code. So code coverage is a useful metric, but it is not a guarantee of quality. It just checks how much code was exercised. It doesn't verify the quality of our tests. And we can take advice from Kent Beck, the creator of extreme programming, and find a balance between the amount of tests that we implement and the confidence that we get from them. And this effectiveness of the safety net that we build with our automated tests is amplified by the version control. If we go in small steps, as described by Arek in his presentation, we can go small, we can do bold changes, we can fail fast and improve. We can learn, or we just can roll back, scrape everything off, and start again. So yes, tests can help us find bugs, but this isn't their core purpose. And when we talk about tests and bugs, we talk about preventing bugs from happening. Every person that has ever written code must have introduced an error at some point, even as simple as a typo. So automated tests are a bug repellent in a sense that they keep us safe from the effects of those trivial mix-ups, from crushing our code in production. And when we have a good code surface covered by tests, we can be more confident that the changes we introduce don't break anything. Well, provided we run our tests before checking in our changes to the code base. So we might have changed something about how we handle the ADSL data, and maybe now some table is affected. If we have a test that checks the rendering of this table, we will learn that something is wrong and we can investigate the issue. So I really encourage you to start using this approach, because even for non-trivial outputs like images, TestDat allows you to add tests very easily. The other aspect of reliability is that tests can help us reduce the risk related to verifying the behavior of the software in some very highly improbable circumstances that we cannot easily check with manual testing. And what I mean by that is like maybe an input that will happen only once in a million. Or maybe it's a test of what happens if there are 10 users at a time, but we only have 2 testers available. So in a sense, automated testing is similar to the high-throughput screening robotics platform. It can probe a vast combinations of inputs and states that would be very difficult to manage manually. Automated tests will do this job more reliably, more quickly, and more cheaply than manual testing. Automated tests are efficient. Another important aspect of reliability is that tests help us protect against changes in our dependencies. R is open source, and its power comes from the vast ecosystem of packages. When we use those packages, we rely on maintainers of those packages to keep them up to date and bug-free. We need to trust them that they work correctly and won't break our code. But code is a live thing. It changes, it evolves. And when we rely on external packages, we need to be sure that if they change, they don't change our code. When we have a good test suite, we can be confident that if we upgrade our dependencies, we will learn if they break our code. And if they do, we can fix it now instead of finding it out in production. So we went through 5 major types of benefits we can get from good automated testing. It was better code quality, documentation, reproducibility, scalability, and reliability. But those benefits come at a cost. We need to invest time in learning how to write good tests. We need to invest time in writing good tests. And we also need to invest in maintaining them. But testing is not reserved to specialized software engineering teams. They are for everyone who writes code and looks for ways to improve the quality of their work. And what's important is to come to automated testing with a clear goal in mind. We need to know what we want to achieve with tests and not to do them because just somebody tells you to, or to get this nice green bar on CI, or maybe to find that specific level of code coverage that somebody tell you is, yeah, it's good to have it. So testing is something you need to learn, and to get better, you need to practice. But getting more effective at something is also a matter of tools. And I think in the R community, there's an unspoken rule that if a problem exists, there's a package for it. And if not, you should write one. And the needs in Pharma has sparked Pharmaverse. There are already some packages that help with accessing the safety of a package and reproducibility. And the same things are happening with testing. There are already some efforts in this direction, like the Verifier2 package that helps you compare RTF files. So what innovations we will see in the future? I don't know, but I will be excited to see them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jakub. That has been a great presentation, very clear. I think now those that are not sure about investing in tests will have a lot of arguments for doing it. So please put your questions or comments in the chat. While you are doing this, I may ask a question myself. So all these principles and ideas to implement the testing strategy, if we think in the GxP validation, many teams, they have models that do some kind of statistical analysis. Do you see any additional specification for testing those type of functions? What do you think?
So I believe a model is still a function that has its inputs and outputs. And as with any other function, we should treat it as a black box, that we don't know how it works, but that it produces a certain output from a given input. So I would say test it as any other function, and this way you will know that for specific input, you will get a given output.
Thanks. So I think there are no more comments. So thank you very much again, Jakub. And we can go for our next speaker.